Hello, everyone. I'm Tyler Woods. I'm the author of 11th Hour Preparedness. And though this book was written back in 2013, or the last edition was 2013, it's more appropriate today than ever. And I'll be reading it for you. This is part 4, and we're going to be picking up at about page 47. I didn't give chapter numbers, so I can't give you those, but I'll give you the chapter titles as we go by them. So let's begin. Time to move, page 47. What might indicate a genuine need to get to higher ground? Indicators may come quickly, even overnight. The morning news may report that America has defaulted on its national debt. That means our money has lost its backing and is worthless. There will be runs on the banks and grocery stores by those who didn't prepare. When things like that happen, you will have about 3 or 4 days to get to where you need to be. After that, social disruption will start and travel may become dangerous. Disbelief will cloud the reasoning of many as they wait too long to make their exodus from the city. This is no time to waste standing in long lines for food or fuel. Remember, preparedness is done before the trouble starts. Terrorist attack may come violently or subtly, as in massive computer failures, but anything that causes the suspension of interstate trucking should be a definite signal to get out of Dodge or stay put if you're already in a safe location. Pandemics rise progressively and travel fast, and we're in one. There is a difference between a newspaper headline pandemic by the media and a real pandemic. Real pandemics leave hundreds to thousands of dead in their wake. If you hear of this in any major cities of the world and it begins to sweep America, it's time to make tracks to a retreat. Keep the phone open as long as possible and stay tuned to radio and TV coverage. I would rather side with caution and happily return home after an unexpected, remarkable recovery than wait to travel after it became too late to assure my family's safety. Like hurricanes, boarding up after the wind starts is not easy or safe and may not even be possible. Similarly, shopping for supplies and arranging a safe retreat location will be difficult, if not impossible, after crisis is upon us. Natural disasters almost always come quickly with little advance of warning. They may make travel impossible, and leaving ahead of a hurricane is good advice. If natural disaster hits your city as an isolated incident, help will be on its way from other areas of our nation. If natural disaster affects large areas of our country, you may be on your own for a prolonged time. Other indicators may come gradually. As an economy slowly fails, governments will seek more ways to squeeze tax income to fuel monstrous spending appetites. Hyperinflation will cause property taxes to exceed your house payment, and the cost of fuel, food, and essentials will make travel nearly impossible. This is a frog in the pot scenario, where the heat rises slowly and the frog doesn't realize the need to jump until it's too late. Getting out of Dodge. As many accumulate preparations for adverse times, we need caution to avoid ideas that could cost us everything. I call these stupid thoughts. And most are comical, but with a bit of truth. Some of these are, FEMA will save you. Tell that to cities wiped out in recent storms. Second, everyone will band together and share. Like the residents of New Orleans. Or the third, the rapture will precede any trouble. Christians suffered under communism, Soviet communism, for 73 years. And there are places in the world where Muslims today literally burn down the homes of Christians while the Christians are in there. So this happens. They're not getting out of trouble. Why do we think we will? Another line of thought that could prove dangerous is, my guns will protect me. It is a foolish belief that enough firepower can keep you safe in any situation. Nothing could be further from the truth. Desperate times will cause desperate people to do desperate things. Once word gets out to starving masses that you may be sitting on resources of food, not even mounds of bodies will keep them from trying to get them. Eventually, someone will get lucky and breach your defenses. Worse is the understanding that those killed would not be zombies from a distant land. They would be neighbors, residents from your town, and people who once called you a friend. How would you live with yourself if you did succeed in keeping your resources? Taking a life is an act that permanently changes you, no matter how justified the action was. Here is a quote. This one's mine. A jury of 12 may acquit you, but a jury of 1 reconvenes each day. Preparedness plans need to include a bug out scenario and an invasion strategy. Bug out. 2 modes are important. The first is when you have some time for an orderly exit, as in hurricane preparedness. Supplies should be preloaded into standard-sized containers with a target weight of less than 50 pounds each. Keep a fully fueled and well-repaired vehicle at the ready and pray you never have to use it. When events begin to look like it's time to bug out, you should be already gone. Don't waste time hoping things will get better. You can always come back if they do get better. Have a destination with resources ready in place. Resources should be well hidden from vandals or those who might stumble onto your remote location. Buried caches in sealed buckets or large coolers are excellent, as they could be retrievable in the event that your retreat was occupied. Think about where you could place them to allow you discreet retrieval. If your destination retreat is further than 1 tank of fuel from your point of origin, you may plant caches of food, water, and fuel along the way. Locations to hide them might include wilderness areas and parklands. Locate a place with good landmarks and away from observation. The disturbed soil needs time to return to normal after you plant your cache, and you will need uninterrupted time to dig it up when it's needed again. Plan multiple cache options. If one cache were spoiled or discovered before you got to it, do you have another that is still within reach with the resources on hand? An important note regarding caching firearms and ammunition: if your cache is discovered and weapons you place there are involved in a crime, you could be held responsible for not securing them properly. A second bug out mode allows no time to grab one thing, but to grab one thing and run. This could be in the event of a fire or an imminent invasion. Each person in the house should have their own pack with basic survival equipment such as wilderness water filter, compass, map to your retreat location, food, protective clothing, and other essentials to last several days. Have a course of action established. Just running into the wilderness may save your hide today, but what about tomorrow? This is where caches are of great advantage. If you have provisions along the way for being on foot, they would also be alternative resources if you were in your vehicle. Invasion strategy. No matter how comfortable and secure we believe our place of refuge is, things can change. The best strategy is to become invisible. Bring no attention to yourself and present an image that will not attract those who may be looking for resources. This can best be done by maintaining a cold camp. For the first 3 months after the loss of infrastructure, these are the most dangerous days when extreme acts of human depravity will surface. It is also the time when most of those who did not prepare will die of violence, disease, and starvation. A cold camp is one that emits no light at night, no evidence of activity by day, and no cooking odors ever. Wash on the line, people working a garden, and work activity of any sort is evidence of people who have food to produce energy. Keeping a cold camp means eating cold food, burying garbage, and performing all chores at night without light. Even with the best of operational logistics, searching bands of hostiles may still locate you. If invaded, there will be little time to hide anything and still escape. It's best to leave your camp and return after the adversaries move on. That doesn't mean you have to leave them everything. Caching is a good plan for your home. Why stack all your provisions in one easy to find storeroom? One man buried a 500-gallon plastic septic tank and used it to store his preparedness food. Who would look in a septic tank for something to eat? Another had a soda vending machine that was gutted and used as a weapons locker. It was an insulated strongbox that sat in the corner of his garage with the cord cut off. It was not a place where a looter would waste considerable energy to find food. After looters have trashed the place looking for food, it's even less likely they would return to look again. If you have food caches around your property that were buried several months before, the ground would revert to a natural look and show no sign of hiding food. Ground temperature would keep your food cool, as long as you place your caches 2 feet or better below ground. As for firearms, I have plenty and will use them if necessary. My purpose for using defensive firearms is to escape harm and flee to safety while protecting my family. Remember, the best place to be when trouble breaks out is somewhere else. Let's pray we never have to exercise extreme actions, but being prepared considers the worst and devises a plan to address it. If your plan requires escape to a survivable location, it is important to get going early and to have an established place to go. But what if failure comes slowly? Driving most preparedness efforts today is the fear of sudden collapse of infrastructure, leading to zombie-like hordes of starving masses. A common code name for the complete collapse of society is the zombie apocalypse. Threats have to be reckoned on 2 criteria. First, how likely is the threat to happen? Second, what are the consequences of not being prepared for it? A house fire is not a likely event. Statistical facts is that less than 1 in 96,000 people will die in a fire in a given year. Though the likelihood is low, the consequence is high, which accounts for healthy sales of smoke detectors and fire insurance. The likelihood of a zombie apocalypse is low, but I prepare for it because if it were to happen, those not prepared have little chance to survive. I also have smoke detectors in my house. What if the meltdown of our society doesn't begin with a sudden collapse? What if escalating inflation and unemployment continue as the nation manages to keep the lights on? What if abandoning your only source of income to flee to a safe retreat is not a viable option? Evidence of progressive economic woe is everywhere and getting worse. I was in a major lumber and hardware store to buy some insulation board of the type I had purchased only a few months prior. What I found was a dramatic reduction of the type and variation of material available. Before I could choose from various thicknesses up to several inches with multiple options of surface coatings. What I find now is greatly reduced inventory and selection. I can still get 1-inch insulation, but I have to glue 2 sheets of 1/2-inch foil-faced board to get it. They are not temporarily out of stock. They are simply stocking fewer options. The same is becoming the norm at the grocery store, with fewer brand options available. In the past, you could choose between several brands of the same cut of green beans, but today you're generally offered a store brand and perhaps 1 or 2 premium brands. Not only are stores employing fewer and less qualified help, but they are reducing inventory and selection. As fuel prices soar, this will only get worse. What to do if collapse comes slowly? America's inevitable payback for living large on credit is not going to be avoided. The result of bad financial management at a national level is certain. The question is only the manner in which economic failure comes. Many countries are ahead of us in their financial slide, yet they managed to avoid the sudden collapse scenario. Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece, and Spain are prime examples. Unemployment is severe, economic outlook is grim, and citizens are suffering. Their governments remain, however, and those with jobs can ill afford to leave them. In any nation, sudden collapse remains a viable threat, but it is quite possible that we follow a slow decline for an extended time with a final collapse at the end. A new term has emerged to describe America's floundering fiscal fiasco. Keep in mind, this was written 2013, and at that time we were at the bottom of the previous administration's near economic collapse of this country. Today, we saw a robust economy, but under this COVID-19 CCP pandemic, we could see a sudden reversal of all of that and find unemployment reaching as much as 30%. We are in a very, very fragile economic situation right now. A new term has emerged to describe America's floundering financial fiasco. It's being called zombie economics, and it accurately depicts an economy that is far from alive but not quite dead. The path of slower collapse has many earmarks of what is evident today. Some expectations are scarcity of stable employment. As the cost of living increases, markets begin turning away from non-essential products. This includes fitness centers, restaurants, recreational products, and vacation-related businesses. As the labor pool grows, business will increase the use of part-time staff to avoid paying employee benefits that are reserved for full-time workers. I worked as a grocery store clerk for a chain of stores that had less than 3 full-time workers. Everyone was kept at part-time to avoid paying minimum wage and basic benefits. Part-time was defined as less than 40 hours per week, and I regularly worked 39 hours per week. There will always be ways to circumvent the rules, and politics is no different. Our current unemployment level is posted between 8 and 9%, but the federal scale intentionally ignores some significant numbers. First, unemployment has many working 2 and 3 jobs with no benefits to replace a lost job that had benefits. Federal labor statistics report a worker with 3 part-time jobs as 3 employed persons, while the unemployed person is counted just once. Secondly, those with exhausted unemployment benefits remain unemployed, but are no longer counted because they can no longer file for unemployment compensation. And third, college graduates who fail to find work are not counted as unemployed because the term unemployed is defined as having lost employment, and they have not begun employment. When labor statistics are corrected for these oversights, the unemployment statistics jump to between 17 and 20%. We are well within the statistics of the Great Depression and headed for worse. Now we have a chart from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and it tracks percentage of eligible workers either employed or actively seeking employment. And the graph just takes a dive towards 2013. At the same time, we are being told that employment statistics are improving. The total number of actively employed or actively searching for employment is falling. Escalating cost of living and taxes. Federal, state, and local governments, feeling the pinch from a declining business and earnings market, are seeking new methods to maintain their spending plans. The cost of social spending for a growing unemployed population, coupled with losses in tax revenue from businesses that have closed or moved offshore, creates a gaping hole in available tax revenues. Rather than making cuts in spending, governments usually seek new methods of increasing tax revenue. Currently, the IRS is planning $1 billion budget increase to hire additional agents that will aggressively pursue lost revenue from taxpayers. While the IRS becomes more aggressive, expected tax breaks will be eliminated. Taxpayers have recently lost deductions for childcare, capital gains from the sale of their primary residence, educational expenses for college tuition, and other deductions that many depend upon. Local governments are also on the prowl for additional finance through increased fees for services and stepped up traffic enforcement with less issue of warning citations. Food prices are steadily increasing, but fail to capture media attention because fuel prices take top billing. Whenever fuel prices rise, the cost of everything else follows. Everything we purchase is affected by the cost of transportation. Local property tax assessments are escalating in the face of declining real estate market. Even properties with mobile homes that lose value with age are seeing property tax increases. How can this be when listing appraisals are declining? Even still, property value assessments are up as much as 30%. Increasing tax revenues takes no thought to the struggling population that has to pay more with less income, and they often circumvent voter approval. Reduction of social benefits. The chase to collect more tax revenue from a declining income will eventually result in failure to meet the staggering cost of social revenue or social services. When unemployment compensation, food subsidies, and Medicaid, Medicare payments start to run out of funding, social unrest and rioting ensues, as in Greece and Spain. Much of our population has grown dependent on entitlement aid and tends toward violence when it is removed or reduced. Increase of vice and crime. Some things thrive in a depressed economy. Our most depressed cities have a thriving drug and alcohol industry. Drug users resort to theft and robbery to support their habit, and declining law enforcement exacerbates the problem. In cities like Detroit, Michigan, it is reported that entire areas of town are not safe to enter by day or night, and even the city light poles have been stripped of their copper wiring by vandals. Growth of more restrictive government. As crime increases, the incidence of justifiable homicide through self-defense also increases. A self-reliant citizenry offends bureaucrats, and these incidents will be used to bring more restrictive social controls upon law-abiding citizens. Criminals, however, will continue to ignore any controls. What to do now? With few exceptions, those who are preparing for a sudden collapse are on the right track if collapse comes slowly. Maintaining a store of the 4 F's, food, which includes food and water, fuel, first aid, and firearms, is still the right thing to do and should remain a priority. Becoming active in a local church, preferably one with preparedness awareness, is an important means of establishing yourself in a support group. A slow decline of your economy emphasizes a few additional considerations and caution. One precaution is to avoid consuming food stores as a hedge to inflation. Things can and will get worse. Secure, durable employment. If you are employed in a discretionary industry that would likely suffer under serious economic times, you may look for more stable income. Types of employment that will remain under even the most extreme conditions are vital services, such as automotive repair, fuel services, gasoline, propane, or heating oil sales and delivery, and other related work that cannot be replaced. A telling indicator of declining markets is the inventory of recreational vehicles at major dealers. The same dealers that 10 years ago sold $1 million motorhomes are now doing a brisk business selling mid to low range camper and fifth wheel trailers. Those who sold their homes and planned to travel the country while living their remaining years in a luxury RV are now trading down and staying put. Remember the highways that once were crowded with RVs? Seasonal migration between the northern and southern states has been significantly reduced by the cost of fuel and a rising cost of living. Eliminate debt. Debt is what brought this country to the problem it faces today, and it will destroy those who attempt to carry it personally. Extreme measures are warranted to eliminate personal debt. Cancel the cable. Cancel the cable TV. Drop your fitness center membership, reduce your phone to basic services, sell your second car, and sell the boat or RV. Do whatever it takes to eliminate expenses and increase debt payoff. As our cost of living increases, the burden of debt payments will sink you. Generate a buffer. Having cash on hand is important. When the power goes out, only those with cash will be able to make purchases. Strive for self-sufficiency. Learn produce gardening. With a focus on raising foods that grow in your climate and cost you the most at the grocery store, do the same with fruit trees. Begin baking your own bread. Premium bread costs about $3 per loaf. It's up above $4 today. $3 a loaf from the store, but can be made for under $1 in your kitchen. Shop the farmers markets and start canning what you buy. Buy cheaply while it is in season or on sale. Whenever possible, barter services or products rather than paying cash. Start raising chickens. 3 chickens will supply all the eggs normally needed by 2 people. More chickens will provide barter material for other things you need. And in this current pandemic lockdown or pandemic social distancing, let me add that just the other day, I had a neighbor that called me and asked if we had some extra eggs because her daughter could find none in 2 cities and was coming their way. And did I have some eggs that I could share? And they were willing to trade. And they traded 3 rolls of paper towels for 1 dozen eggs from our chickens. Well, I would have given her the eggs, but you know what? Bartering is a good thing. And if they ever need those paper towels back, I'll give them back. But still the same thing. Bartering is real and it's happening. And where people aren't, spending money, they will certainly trade resources and bartering happens. And, we just have the chickens for our needs. But it turned out that we ended up supplying somebody with a need and they ended up providing us with something you can't find in the stores. Learn to do your own home and auto repairs. When that's not an option, try to barter for those services. Discover natural food sources. Here in South Texas, we have an abundance of prickly pear cactus. New growth paddles are a nutritious substitute for green beans and can be canned, pickled, or cooked fresh. The pears are nutritionally rich and also preserve well. We also have mesquite trees that produce a bean pod that can be ground into flour for making everything from pancakes to loaf bread. Purslane is another prolific weed that is both nutritious and tasty. Between these sources and the abundant stock of wild pigs, nobody should go hungry, at least down here. Learn self-defense. We're not talking about becoming a martial artist, though that's not bad. There are a growing number of good courses that start with obtaining a concealed handgun license. Once you can legally carry a personal defense firearm, there are several other high-value training options, such as weapons retention, tactical pistol, tactical carbine, and tactical shotgun courses. These are not courses designed to make you a mercenary soldier. They are designed for average people who recognize that legally carrying a sidearm does not automatically teach you how to use it in a fight for your life. Tactical training could mean the difference in who wins and who doesn't get home to their family. As a side note, back in, I think it was the year 2000, a man named George Hennard drove his truck through the wall of Luby's Cafeteria in Killeen, Texas. He ended up killing 22 people that day. Texas, at that time, did not allow for anyone to have a concealed carry permit, and even the police had to leave their weapons in their patrol car locked up if they were to go into a restaurant for lunch. It was such an anti-gun state. Well, that day, George Hennard was in a minority. He was the only one that had a gun in that place. And he systematically murdered 22 people, one of which was my sister-in-law. My wife and I have had concealed carry permits ever since, because that would have made the difference. Had any person in that whole restaurant been armed, they might have ended that tragedy of 22 people losing their life. Let's continue. Evaluate your spending. Find less expensive to alternatives to high dollar items. Find less expensive alternatives to high dollar items. Big name liquid laundry detergent costs about $17 for barely over a gallon. Did you know that you could make your own effective gallon of liquid laundry detergent for less than $1? It uses Fels naphtha bar soap, washing soda, not baking soda, and borax. The mixture instructions can be found in the back of this book or look online. They're out there. Our daughter's pet dog developed food allergies and needed hypoallergenic dog food that normally costs $30 for a 10-pound bag and only available through our vet. Hypoallergenic brands from the store were of no use. After a little investigation, I learned how to make our own hypoallergenic dog food from rice, eggs, and green beans. The dogs loved it, and I make a week's food in about 20 minutes, and the cost is less expensive than even the cheap store-bought dog food. Sell unnecessary stuff. We each suffer from the same financial disease that is killing our nation. We have an appetite for things we don't need. Most of the world has fewer possessions than what we carry onto an airplane for a short trip. Selling that extra stuff will reduce debt and bring in extra cash to fund our preparedness. Less stuff requires less space, and less space means we could live comfortably in a smaller home with smaller utility bills. We rarely recognize the hidden expense of having too much stuff. The point of surviving the inevitable trouble is to anticipate the challenges and prepare workable plans before they are needed. It's too late to start a garden when you're hungry, or buy a gun when the bad guy is in your living room. Preparedness is planning ahead. Develop good associations. The time to build an alliance with people of like mind is now. Seeking out a preparedness group that shares an understanding and mindset that is helpful and realistic. Beware that there are multitudes of groups that are long on fancy and short on reality. These groups will maintain overbearing leadership that leans heavily on paramilitary organization and hardware with little room for any opinion that they didn't voice first. I call these chest thumpers and gun show commandos. The intent of gathering together for mutual assistance is to survive and thrive. And the best way to do that is to avoid conflict with any appearance of being some renegade militia. Good places to find people of like mind are CQ or MAG, Mutual Assistant Group associations. CQ standing for colloquium. Another good place is at a local church that recognizes we are headed for times of adversity. I have discovered a wave of churches of differing practice that share this understanding. It is no coincidence that they came to this realization at similar times. I believe God is preparing his people. If you are in a church that rejects the possibility of our experiencing extremely difficult times, I suggest you start looking for a different fellowship. Even today, there are believers in churches around the world who are experiencing terrible times. There is no reason to think we are deserving of an exception, and every reason to believe that our time is short. Enduring through times as a single family alone is not a good plan. We need fellowship and the economy of numbers. And here's a quote. A new term has emerged to describe America's floundering fiscal fiasco. It's being called zombie economics, and it actually depicts an economy that is far from alive, but not quite dead. I'm going to read this next chapter because it's only 2 pages, and it's an interesting illustration that is from my growing up. It's one mogul at a time, page 65. Just thinking of all these things can give you a headache. Addressing each system to provide a reasonable backup can turn that headache into a migraine. It can be a helpless feeling to realize where you need to be, how far you need to go, and what is required to get there. Let me offer something I learned while snow skiing. In my youth, I was at an intermediate skiing level, but often attempted more difficult slopes than my skill called for. One such slope was at the end of a long traverse of flat trail. I should have had a clue to what was coming. Slope is a factor of distance traveled by amount of descent. Since the chairlift did the ascent for me, and I was traveling quite a while without much descent, all of the remaining descent was about to pile up fast, and it did. There I stood at the top of the largest and steepest slope of moguls I had ever seen. For non-skiers, moguls are patterns of snow mounds usually created by the wind. Worse was a line of people at the base of that hill waiting to ride the chairlift. Those people looked like ants, but I was certain they were all about to witness my making a total fool of myself as I tumbled down that hill. At least I had company. I was skiing with friends, and one of our group had some very good advice for us. Don't look at the hill. Just keep your eyes on the next mogul. That's what I did. Forgetting about where I needed to be and how far I had to go, I kept my focus on the next task at hand. How was I going to approach and handle the next mogul? There are many options with moguls, just as there are with preparedness. You can turn before, on top of, or on the backside of moguls. With preparedness, you can address needs for food, fuel, first aid, or firearms. Just don't get bogged down with where you need to be. Deal with what you can do right now. I made it down the hill with few mishaps and was surprised when I reached the base. I can imagine we also looked pretty good up there. No one watching could see our terrified hearts, but they could see that we were tackling a huge task, one mogul at a time. Okay, our next section will begin at page 67, and I hope you've had a great day. And this is coming up. This is going to be released on Saturday, and tomorrow is Easter. So my greatest prayer for your blessings as you face this wonderful time celebrating an empty tomb.